I've made it no secret that I love me a good anime opening. In fact, there have been times an opening can color the way I feel about the show it belongs to in both positive and negative ways. If an anime is not the most exciting time, I can be, and have been, convinced to keep watching just so I can continue watching the OP in the correct context. Inversely, if an anime is really good but its opening falls flat, I could be inclined to do the unthinkable, skip the opening, which is something that I really try not to do except in extreme circumstances, or if the show is so good I can't help it. In this episode of Anime Ambush, I'll be discussing what I believe to be the top 5 OPs from the Winter 2024 anime season. To make this happen, I'll be considering both visuals, music, and how well the two work in harmony with each other. But this is a subjective list, and you will likely disagree with my picks, so if you do, I encourage you to leave me a comment with your own list down below. I'll admit, this one mostly makes it on this list because the song is an absolute banger, but it also does some really cool visual stuff that should not be overlooked. To start, there are multiple moments where we're shown Dark Elise, Takemoto, and then Cupcake Elise overlaid atop each other. In the first instance, the order is shifted a bit. It starts with Cupcake Elise, then Takemoto, Dark Elise, and then one more shot of Cupcake Elise. This is really neat because it implies that Cupcake Elise is reflecting on her past lives first as Takemoto, because that's where she learned to use her skills as a doctor to help those in need, then as Dark Elise because she can't forgive herself for her past crimes, but then she remembers who she is now and takes action to right the sins of her past. I really appreciate the synapse effect that's going on in the character's drop shadow. It's very clearly a reference to the one instance where Takemoto does a brain blast straight out of Jimmy Neutron, but it's a cool stylized effect that ties back to the show in some small way. I also like the use of fire as a motif to transition from Dark Elise to Takemoto, and from the doomed plane back to Dark Elise. To be honest, the rest of the OP is what you'd come to expect from an otome anime opening. A showcase of characters central to the plot, but near the end, there's one sequence I really like, which starts with a flashback from Dark Elise's timeline that transitions to a stoic, mournful Takemoto. She opens her eyes, sees the tools which allow her to save lives, and then she's in the operating room. But at the last second, she's Cupcake Elise, recalling some good memories of her new life before the rose petals, which, if fire was the iconographic element of her life as Dark Elise, the petals are representative of her life as Cupcake Elise, fill the screen, ending the opening. I don't know if there's a universe where this one didn't land face first on this list. I mean, it's Masayoshi Oishi, the lead vocalist behind OXT, who are responsible for several Overlord OPs and EDs, and heck, Oishi himself is known for the Tada Never Falls in Love OP, which is still considered a bop to this day. In the beginning of this OP, before we see the logo, we're introduced to our main protagonist, Tsubasa Shiki, as he initiates the events to come by running headfirst into his new town. As the logo is shown, it's interrupted by the series' primary love interests, Minami, Sayori, and Rena, which I believe is meant to signify that these girls in particular are absolute forces of nature in Tsubasa's new life in Hokkaido. This idea is expanded upon a little later in the OP when Tsubasa is inexplicably sent flying through the sky with Minami in full control of her contrails, Sayori in absolute panic, but trusting Minami enough to hold her hand, and Rena being Rena. I also love how they all disappear in the blink of an eye, leading to Tsubasa's one-man cover of Free Fallin' by Tom Petty, which implies that these three girls were the source of arcane magic that allowed them to defy the laws of gravity in the first place. To cap off this absolute earworm of an opening, the entire cast engaging in a very simple but fun dance routine sends me back into the days when the Hare Hare Yukai was a staple at anime conventions. I have to applaud Hokkaido Gals Are Super Adorable for confirming the theory that you can take an anime fan out of the late aughts, but you can't take the late aughts out of the anime fan. It should be illegal to overlook a Sawano track. In most every instance, whether it's the second ending theme to All Noah Zero, the first OP for Recreators, or the second OP for Recreators, if an anime has anything tying them to this powerhouse producer, there's a good chance it'll be a banger. Solo Leveling's OP is no exception. I really like how its dark tone conveys a sense of unease, like you can never truly know what's going to happen next. To start us off, we're shown a highlight reel of the double dungeon, which low-key spoils who the final 5 survivors are if you look close enough. It then cuts to a scene somewhat later once Jinwoo has buffed up, and then cuts to a shot of his sister at the park, which I interpret to hint at how much of what he does during the series, at least at the start, is motivated by his family. But his other motivation, self-preservation, rears its ugly head as Jinwoo is preoccupied by the store available within his system menu. Then, it's time for action. I adore the extended action sequence in this OP. It does a good job of emphasizing what makes this series so damn fun to watch. The animation in this sequence is so fluid and masterful, it pumps you up for the show itself. I mean, if Jinwoo is doing stuff like this in the opening, imagine what he'll be doing in the actual series. In between this sequence's end and the next sequence I want to highlight, there's some typical anime OP stuff that goes on, including characters doing cool poses and other contextless scenes. But then, just like how the beginning of this OP shows us the highlight reel of the first episode, the ending shows us the highlight reel of the final episodes, including the showdown against Ygritte the Blood Red and the subsequently endless waves of armored soldiers. The biggest difference here is that Jinwoo isn't barely surviving the encounter. In fact, he's so on top of things he's finding time to breakdance. I admit, this'll likely be a contentious pick for number 2, but I am willing to stand by it. I mentioned in the most recent Anime I Adore episode that Shangri-La Frontier is really cool, and Danger Danger is the opening that managed to convince me of that. It's performed by Fathoms, an almost brand new musical act composed of some top-tier talent, including Sick Boy, Ivan from Survive Said the Prophet, and Pierre Nakano from Ling Tosite Segure, with other members' identities not being public information as of this video. In addition, joining Fathoms on this track is Icy, who in reality is the famed vocalist Riol. So we're working with some heavy hitters. It should also be said this OP features a lot of text, but I actually think that works to its advantage. This intro is meant to serve as an eye before the storm in a lot of ways. The characters who appear might not be in perpetual motion, but that's implied to be because they're preparing for the conflicts peppered throughout the second half of the season. I have to mention though, this OP made me hope that Rakuro, Pencilgon, Oikatsu, and Psyker Zero are able to team up at some point in the second season. I have to admit that the coolness meter being high like it is probably due to the OP director's decision to consolidate scenes from both the fight against Weathermon the Tomb Guard and the subsequent fights against the Humming Lich and what I believe to be the revenge attack against Ashura Kai. But most of all, the bit where Weathermon readies his katana and the sound permeates through the song itself. Oh my gosh, I need more of this series, holy shit! It's such an amazing OP, I can't help myself! It needs said that I am not a fan of Mashle, Magic, and Muscles, but to be honest, I don't really think you need to be in order to recognize this opening's brilliance, both musically and visually. And it's hardly a surprise given the artist behind this incredible bop is Creepy Nuts, who also churned out the earworm that was Call of the Night's OP. In fact, this OP legitimately makes me want to give Mashle a second chance, even though I'm fairly certain its humor isn't for me. So I can't really speak to how the story connects to visual symbolism, but I can speak to how it looks without context. I really like the constant striking yellow used in much of this OP. I don't think many IPs have what it takes to predominantly use yellow in its presentation. To be honest, the only other one I can think of that does it well is Cyberpunk 2077. But then, at some point, the predominant color changes from yellow to green, then magenta, and various blues and purples, which I think is meant to keep the viewer on their toes. And then, the dance. I said earlier that dance routines and openings send me back to a simpler time, and this is no exception. It's such a basic dance, yet I can't help but go along with it every time I watch or hear this OP. Moving past that, I really enjoy the fluid action sequence after the dance is concluded, with Mash sending a flurry of monsters to an early grave with a series of cartoonish combat maneuvers. It really makes me wonder, if I love this OP as much as I do, would I like the series itself? I might have to give it another shot in the coming weeks, if I can find the time and energy, that is. Hello my bits and bobs, it's your boy Pixcelation. I'd like to thank y'all for watching this episode of Anime Ambush. I haven't done one of these since the winter of 2018, if memory serves. But I like to think they'd be a good counterpart to anime I adore each season, so if you'd like to see more stuff like this, be sure to let me know in the comments while you're helping each video of mine blow up. In the meantime, this has been Pixcelation, reminding each and every one of you to stay pixelated.